Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're talking all about failure. I'm so excited. I know that sounds a little strange to be excited to be talking about failure, but we're going to reframe that, and I'm going to be sharing a bunch of stories from my past where things did not go so well in terms of business and what I learned. And this was inspired by the conversation that happened earlier this week. On Tuesday, I had spoken to Dave Ursillo, and he really opened up and shared about his failed, in quotes, first book launch. And it really inspired me to get out there and keep talking about this kind of thing, because in 2019, still weird to say that, it's easy on social media to just see all the shiny moments, right? Usually people are sharing the highs, but that's not reality, right? That's not real. So the more us as teachers and leaders can speak up and start talking about the journey and what it really looked like to get to a certain destination, I think it's really beneficial for everyone. And I want to remind you now, before we leap in, of the two ways that you can support this podcast and you can give back and kind of take on a leadership role, which is the first, leave a review. If that's something you haven't done yet, please take a moment to do it today, because it really does make a difference. Without people leaving reviews, the show doesn't get found. So leaving a review and taking a couple moments to do that really does help get the show in front of more people looking to transform their life through yoga and meditation. And it can be confusing to do on iTunes, I know. So if you expand the description box below, we have details on how to do that. And in 2018, I had a really cool offer where I was saying that I would give you this really beautiful journaling PDF. It's a PDF of my favorite journaling prompts and affirmations if you left a review. And I'm going to do that again now for a couple weeks. So what you do is you screenshot your review, or either on your phone or your computer. You're going to email it to my team, info@brettlarkin.com. All of this is in the show notes. Send that over to us, and then we'll respond with this really beautiful PDF just as a thank you for taking the time to leave a review, because I know we're all so busy. And then the second way you can support the show is to make a purchase on SavannahSpirit.com. Remember, you can use that coupon code TAKE25 for $25 off anything in your shopping cart. And they have really beautiful crystals, really beautiful yoga clothing. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. All right, now let's get right into it. So one of the first things I wanted to share with all of you, if you didn't know this already, is that most businesses, or most people that you might look up to as successful, most entrepreneurs are successful because they started several companies in the past, meaning they failed several times in the past. It's actually really rare for what's called a first-time entrepreneur, a first-time business owner, to achieve success. It's usually their third or fourth or sometimes 10th company that really takes off. And this is because it's a learning process, right? You figure a lot out as you go, and you get smarter as you go. And it ties back to one of my key principles that I talk about in my uplifted online yoga teacher training and to all my students in my community, which is the importance of taking action. You're never going to reach your goals and kind of get where you're going if you're too scared to take action, or you think you need more certificates or more courses or more knowledge before you can even take that first step. Yes, furthering your education is fantastic, but you want to do that in tandem with conscious, aligned action, meaning you're taking concrete action steps towards things that scare you. And that's another thing I want to share. Fear never goes away. I think a lot of us believe that, when we hit this certain level in our career, or we make a certain amount of money, or we have a certain number of students, that we just won't feel fear anymore. You'll just be at this new level. And the reality is those fears just mutate, guys. They mutate, they change, and they never go away. So what scares you right now will probably not scare you, but there'll be something new. So fear is just something that you want to get comfortable with. And this is where our yoga meditation practice, all our time on the mat, is in such service, right? Because you can kind of transform that fear into excitement, right? The other side of fear is excitement. And the alchemy of yoga, especially Kundalini yoga and pranayama techniques, really allows us to do that. It allows us to take energy that's fear or worry, take it maybe into specifically third chakra. Alchemy happens, and then it becomes energy that you can harness and sort of put towards your highest good could put towards your intentions. So that's the first thing I wanted to share, is that for most people who have a business or a successful business, whatever that definition of a successful business is for you, and you want to get really clear on that definition, right? For some people, the concept of a successful business has to do with a certain amount of income earned. For other people, a successful business might mean a certain type of lifestyle earned, right? Maybe it means you only work a couple days a week doing something you love, and it's not so much about hitting a specific revenue number. For other people, that revenue number is important, and that's okay too. So one thing you want to do is journal, right, on what success means to you. What is success, right? Is it X amount of dollars? Is it X amount of students? Is it serving people in a particular type of way? Is it getting to be at home with your kids and actually not work that much? So again, I promise I'm going to talk about failure, but I just want to preface this with getting clear on what success means to you is so important. And so many people tell me they want to teach yoga, or they want to have a yoga business or a healing business, but when I ask them to get specific and paint, well, what does the monthly income look like? What does your day-to-day look like? They haven't really filled in all the colors in that picture, right? They kind of just have a hazy, vague idea. And guess what? When you're hazy and vague, the universe just is kind of going to throw that hazy vagueness back at you, meaning that you'll get clients who are maybe kind of a good fit, but not a great fit. Or like random weird opportunities will just start coming your way that are like kind of what you want, but you're like, where's this coming from, right? So you need to get specific, super, super specific. And if you didn't write your New Year's resolutions with me in the January workshop that I hosted that was free, that's now only in Uplifted, my membership community, but consider taking that, because I talk a lot about specificity in terms of resolutions and affirmations and how important it is to get specific if you're really trying to change your life. All right, so we've painted the picture that most successful entrepreneurs are repeat entrepreneurs, meaning they don't hit it off out of the park on their first try. And I completely fit this model. So my very first entrepreneurial endeavor was, I want to say in 2005 or 2006. And this is when blogging was just taking off. It was when the internet was still, it was like Facebook was new, everything was new. WordPress, I think, was even new, because I remember when I set up my blog, I had to choose between Blogspot and WordPress, or maybe they were the same thing. But this is just to paint a vision or paint a picture of how new all this was when I was doing it. And I still get a little sad when I think about it now, because I really was blogging at a time when not a lot of people were. And there was an opportunity for my blog to have really blown up, because I was doing so many of the right things at the right time, but it didn't work out that way. It totally failed. So I had this successful blog, and at the time I was working my first corporate job. I made $30,000 a year. I lived in the center of Manhattan, so $30,000 doesn't get you very far. So I was working as a writer, but everyone at this company, it was sort of like if there was something going on, we all had to write a bunch really fast. But if there wasn't something particular going on, it was sort of a given that a lot of people were working on their own projects, either screenplays or theatrical productions. Everyone was pretty into writing. So I used a lot of my downtime at work and outside of work to blog. And at the time, I hadn't really discovered yoga at this point in my life yet, or I had discovered it, but it hadn't become the forefront. I was still kind of dabbling. I was still that person who was just like going to Bikram occasionally and didn't feel like any yoga was hard enough for me as an ex-dancer and an athlete, right? So yoga wasn't the forefront. Instead, what I was blogging about was kind of what I was experiencing my life at the time as an early 20-something, which was nightlife, dating, restaurants, things like that. And I got connected with a lot of other bloggers in the blogosphere because blogging was so new. It seems crazy to think about now, but I kind of had a network of people whose blogs I'd read, and they'd comment on my blog and I'd comment on theirs. And there was sort of this like underground blogging network of people who wrote about New York lifestyle, right? New York, again, like nightlife, restaurants, dating, people who are writing about the same things that I was. And there was a couple people whose blog I just loved. And what was really cool is a couple restaurants and other sort of venues in New York really liked my blog and actually started paying me to blog or talk about certain events or cover certain events. And to me, that was just like the coolest thing ever, because it was my first taste of this idea of, wow, they're kind of paying me to do something that I'm doing anyway, that I find fun and that I enjoy. So that was a really exciting moment. I started earning some pretty nice side income from this. Nothing crazy, but an extra $800 or $1,000 a month. For me, where I was, that was huge. That was exciting. Over time, I saw my blog get more and more successful, but I decided that it wasn't enough for me to just blog by myself, that I had to pull in and maybe have like a group of people blogging. And again, this was such a good impulse and such a good idea, because if you look at huge content sites like we have now, like Bustle or Gwyneth Paltrow's company, right? It's all like not just one person blogging, it's a lot of people blogging. So I had this idea that I had to kind of form this company and bigger blog. And there were a couple other women's blogs who I felt like were in line with mine, and I was kind of friends with them on the internet and, had commented and were commenting back and forth. And I was like, I want to build this bigger blog publication where each of us, we have our own flavor and we have our own personality, but it becomes this thing that's much bigger. And then how I went about doing this was kind of what I advise people not to do, which is I started getting really caught up in all the tech, all the logistics, and all the legality. So I contacted these women. A lot of them were interested. I signed on a couple, and that meant that I was paying lawyers. I was spending a lot of money to kind of get everything by the book, to get everything legal. And then there was a lot of tech complications of how we imported all their old content into the blog. So there was a lot of work in terms of like nitty-gritty tech stuff and nitty-gritty legal stuff. But what I hadn't really done, which in retrospect is sort of the post-mortem that I wanted to share with you, is I didn't really test the idea of, well, did my audience who read my blog really want me to turn it into something bigger where it was with several other people, right? I didn't have what's called like a product market fit. I didn't do any market research. I didn't ask my audience, the people who read my blog right now, if this was something they'd even be interested in. I was like, I just want to surprise everyone with this thing. And if I have more people, I assumed would be more powerful. And what ended up happening, to keep the story short, is that so much time and effort went into all the legal work and all the tech porting. And guess what? Because me and the other writers hadn't really prepped our audience for this, or one day we let them know, we're like, hey, we're all writing together on this other site. People were just confused, and all our readership went down. And then all of a sudden, it just got really confusing. Like if, for example, one of those venues that was paying me earlier, if I made money on that, did I share that with the other writers? Who was paying for all the hosting of the site? Like all these sort of back-end costs that I hadn't figured out. And instead of getting to write and enjoy it, I just felt stressed managing these other writers. And again, the readership wasn't there really because we had all moved our blogs, which were so well known, to this other new space where we were writing together. Long story short, what I took away from that was that while you do, of course, I'm not going to tell you don't want to take legal precautions, that you don't want to, focus on making everything perfect in terms of the tech. Yes, it's like we all want that. But as an entrepreneur, what I found is that the best thing to do in terms of getting into action isn't taking all those kind of nitty-gritty legalese steps, but instead, it would have been so much better if me and the other writers had posed a question to all of our readers and asked like, hey, how would you feel if my blog merged with like 3 other blogs? Would you still be interested in that? Would you still want to read that, right? And what kind of things would you like us to write about? We never did that because it was always sort of us writing about our lives as bloggers. So there was no connection between us and the people who would be consuming the content, our audience. In some ways, what you'd call our customers. We just did everything in a silo. I did everything in a silo. And I got really caught up again in making sure everything was fair, in caretaking all the other writers. I felt very responsible for them because it had been my idea. And that was very stressful for me, someone who's highly sensitive. That was a huge energy drain. So again, a lot of times when you do entrepreneurial activities, you learn a lot about yourself, and then you want to take note of what those things are. You want to take big note of what those things are, because I think what I learned in that experience was that I don't really like managing a ton of people, nor do I want to be in partnership with a lot of people. I was so much happier, and the blog made so much money, and people liked it so much more when it was just mine, when it was just on my own, and I felt so much more comfortable that way. So that was one thing I learned. The second thing I learned was that, all the legal stuff is important, but we could have tested out, right? Instead of the first step being everyone has to port their content to this new website, we could have just been like, hey, how about I guest blog on your site and you guest blog on mine and just see how it goes. We could have taken so many littler, intense steps that required like lawyers and all these things to just sort of test out the idea. So this I see with a lot of my students and a lot of people I talk to and work with, where they're spending tons of money on trademarking something and they don't even know if it's worth trademarking yet, right? They don't even have a business yet. Or they're spending tons of money on branding and logos and they don't even know if that's ultimately going to be the company name that their audience is going to resonate with because they just started. So while it seems a little backwards, I'd say start engaging your audience, and that was my big takeaway. Like, do just casual baby steps first rather than like getting lawyers involved and, going to the 100% of collaboration and crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's as the first thing you do. All right, flash forward. I'm going to talk about the second company that I started. This is interesting. So I was really interested in starting my own startup because I lived in San Francisco, and that's what you do in San Francisco. It's like tech world. Everyone starts their own business. And because I had worked really, really hard in my corporate job, I had some really good connections and was able to raise over 6 figures. So I was able to raise over $100,000 around this idea of kind of like getting virtual help from a yoga teacher or a hypnotherapist, kind of like a platform where you could go and get hypnotherapy from someone, where you could go and get a private yoga lesson or private meditation lesson from someone. And again, lots of people had this idea. There were a lot of startups like this, but I felt like with my yoga background, which at that point was pretty strong, that I could really have a cool lens into it, let's say. So I raised a bunch of venture capital money, and I kind of had a vision for what I wanted to do. But what happened was I got scared. I got scared to do it, and I got scared to do it by myself. And everyone told me I needed a co-founder, which was actually good advice, but I had forgotten the lesson I had learned several years prior, which was that I actually don't like working with someone in that way. So I found someone who used to work at Google, an amazing engineer, and he already had an app, actually. He had an app that was kind of similar to what I was already doing. It was more like an accountabilities buddy app for people who wanted to lose weight or, again, learn to meditate every day, where people that you didn't necessarily know in real life, but you could check in with each other each day. What I decided to do was to partner up with him because he already had something that was sort of growing, and he had a really strong technical background, obviously being an ex-Google employee. So what he and I did is we embarked on this business together. And guys, this was a nightmare. He and I actually remained very close friends to this day. So our partnership was very strong, and we got along really, really well. What was a nightmare was just everything else, right? I inherited this app from him that was cool, but had so many customer service issues, so many just I inherited a lot of problems, let's say. And then we didn't do a good job taking that initial product and leveraging it for what we wanted to build next. We ended up kind of just changing our mind about what we wanted to do as our venture capital money kind of decreased. So we went from having a really clear vision of what we wanted to do to sort of going to this place where we were like, oh my God, we're running out of money. We need to figure out what makes money, what makes money. And that was, a good impulse. But what ended up happening is that we completely changed the company, and we changed it into something that did make money, but it had nothing to do with what he and I originally wanted. We transformed the company into this search engine optimization tool for healers and yoga teachers and, healing professionals, basically. And the technology was cool and it was working, but guess what? Who has the money to pay for something like that? Not so many yoga teachers, but it ended up being more like doctors and dentists. They had a ton of money and were really excited and eager to pay for our tool, for our search engine optimization tool, to help them show up online and get more clients. So all of a sudden, I wake up one day and I was working my guts out this entire time. It was probably a 1.5 year period of just literally flat out working 10 hours a day. And I wake up and I'm just like, I'm running this search engine optimization company for dentists. It had really turned into like dentists really loved our product. And there was potential there and there was revenue happening, but it had nothing to do with what my original vision was. And the big post-mortem, and what I'll take away from this, is that what happened is we got really scared, or I got really scared about the money piece and about not being able to either raise more money or pay our investors back or make money. And what I took away from this experience was that, and this comes up later, was that I really didn't want, if I did my own company again, for money to be a restraining factor. Okay, I know that sounds crazy. crazy, right? But I was like, I would rather just keep it small, experiment, do stuff totally by myself, and not be responsible for anyone else, not feel like I'm indebted to investors, not feel like I'm indebted and also responsible for a business partner, kind of like the same lesson I learned with those other women who I blogged with. Some people are great and excel in those kind of situations, but I'm not one of them. That's just not my personality. I like total autonomy. I like complete creative freedom, and I don't like to feel really responsible for someone else because it kind of inhibits my creative process and what I feel like I want to be able to do and not do. So that company, total failure in the sense that it didn't make that much revenue, and it was just such a hard period. Oh my gosh, guys, it was hard working such long hours. And then what I did is I decided that I had to get out. And again, this is one of the things that's hard about entrepreneurship. It's not like you can just go to your boss and quit your job, especially when you have investors. You are your boss. So what I did is I pulled all my yoga, manifesting, meditation skills together, which of course, yoga was, again, the forefront of my life at this point. And I said, I'm going to sell this company. I'm going to find someone who wants to buy this company. What are the odds of that happening, right? It's like literally once I put my mind to it and I did all my manifesting work, we sold the company. I sold the company in, I think, 2 months or 3 months, some absolutely ridiculous short amount of time. And then part of the deal was that I had to stay on with that company for a certain number of months as part of the acquisition. We were able to pay all our investors back, just barely. And I stayed on. And then the minute that that contract was up, I left and I was free. And the big lessons I took away from that, I would just say, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to start a company if it's not what you really want to do. And I see people do this all the time. It's like their friend has an idea, sort of like I had this convenient co-founder who popped up and they're like, oh, well, this seems easy. I'll just go with it. Or like me, they maybe you're good at raising money, but ultimately, I didn't like having investors. And all of these lessons kind of pulled together so that when I finally started my yoga business, which was honestly what I had really wanted to do in the first place, I was just too afraid because I had all these stories that yoga teachers can't make money and you can't really make a living doing yoga and oh my gosh, a million other things. Finally, when I cleared those, again, all through mindset work, affirmations, yoga, kundalini, breathing, once I started to clear all that, what was so amazing is when I did finally start my yoga company, I didn't make any of these mistakes that I'd made in my previous companies. I didn't go out and trademark uplifted yoga. I didn't, spend hours on logos and branding and lawyers. No, I just started. I started really small and I got really engaged with my community. And I started asking them from day one what they wanted, what they were interested in. And I let it organically grow. I only just got my trademark, I think last week. And I've been in business and making a full-time living doing this for, I think, close to 3 years now, right? So I really learned from that first experience where I didn't let all the branding and the legalities and all this stuff take over from the beginning. I just started small and let things, once it became a pressing issue that I didn't have a business bank account, I opened one. Once it became a pressing issue that, I didn't have the trademark because the business had really grown, I got on it and made it happen. So for me, that has worked well. For other people, I can only share my experience, but just getting into small action steps for me was so beneficial. And then I definitely had opportunities or was tempted to collaborate with someone in a really deep way or pull in a partner. But I remembered back to that second company. I said, no, I don't want a partner. A lot of people told me that I should talk to the same VCs that I worked with earlier, get in some investment money, maybe even take out a business loan so I could grow faster. But I remembered from that second company, I hated that feeling. I hated that feeling of feeling indebted and that then money might, I might do certain things in order to make money quicker and deviate from my dream. And I didn't want to do that. So I said no. But without having had all those past experiences, none of this could have happened. And another thing, I kept my day job. I worked for a different company at the time. I kept my day job while I was building my yoga business for a really, really long time, a ridiculously long time. And every coach I worked with and every one of my friends was like, you should just quit your job. You should just quit your job. This other, yoga business you're building is clearly doing really well. But again, I wanted not to be financially constrained, right? I wanted total creative freedom and autonomy. I had learned that from the previous 2 companies, total creative freedom and autonomy. And I knew that if I quit the job, my day job, I might feel pressured for the yoga business to make money faster or to do things that would make it make money faster so that I would feel more comfortable. And again, because of the second company, I had learned that that is not what I wanted. That is not where I wanted to be. I would rather put in the long hours and work at the day job way longer than I needed to, just so that I didn't have to take money from investors, just so I didn't have to feel the pressure to do something just because it would make money in the business if it wasn't really where my heart was. And again, that's not the right decision for everyone, but that's what was right for me. And that's ultimately the big message here. When you take action and when you take these baby steps or big steps to start a company, you learn about yourself. And it's when you really have that self-mastery, and that's what yoga really is about, right? Mastering your mindset, mastering your breath, your body, right? When you have that level of mastery, then all of a sudden you know yourself and you know what's going to work for you, because we're all so different in life, in love, in business, right? What for someone else, it could be like completely different, right? They might have learned that like they loved having lots of venture capital money. They loved having a business partner. They loved, right? Like everyone is so different, but you don't know unless you get into action. So my big message, if you're still listening, is if you have a dream for 2019, or you have a dream for a business, get into action by taking small steps and just take any pressure off about if something has to fail or succeed, and just say, I'm going to learn a lot about myself through this process. I'm going to learn a lot about what makes me tick, what I enjoy, what I don't enjoy, because you can't get your way just thinking about it. You can't get your way there just thinking it through. You need to experience it, like, oh, this is what it feels like to have a business partner. Oh, this is what it feels like to have a business loan. Whoa, I'm not sleeping at night. Or whoa, this is so exciting to me. I'm able to invest in things that grow my business so much faster because I have this loan, right? And I really just highlighted in this episode the 2 main companies that I started before I started Uplifted Yoga. But the reality, guys, is that I could talk about this for literally 19 hours. There was so many other little entrepreneurial ups and downs and things that I started in between, too many to count. So I want to thank you for listening. I hope this episode provided some value to you, or maybe you had some aha moments or takeaways. If so, please share those with me. You can find me at Larkin Yoga TV on Instagram and just DM me. Let me know that you heard this episode and if it had any impact or made you think about something in a different way. You can also find me, of course, on my website, brettlarkin.com. I'm super excited because registration for my May online yoga teacher training is now open. And if you're already a yoga teacher, you can take it for continuing education credit for 50% off, which is such a great deal. It's basically like you get to retake your whole 200-hour, get a lot of coaching from me, interact with the group, and there's tons and tons of business material in my online teacher training as well. So even if you're already a teacher, you can take it at this reduced rate and get access to all of that. I'm sending you so much love. Thank you for being here, for listening. Thank you, Savannah, for making this podcast possible. And I'll talk to you and hopefully connect with you in the next episode. So much love from my heart to yours. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.